And this is for all my, anyways, friends, family, anyone who knows I live in Kiev, Ukraine. Or maybe, hopefully, something people can, even if you don't know me. Look at this. It's beautiful. This is my dad. This is my dad. Canadian Embassy just left last night. I was gonna do it, but anyways, my video wasn't working. I wanted to tell everyone back home in Canada. Yeah, I know anyone in the world who's worried. So this is my dad. This is downtown Kiev right now. About as quiet as you can get. There's all the foreigners who've left. All the foreigners who wanted to leave have left, so, you know, fuck them. You know, someone close to me asked me why I didn't leave, and I was telling him, I said, you know, how can I leave? I've got, you know, my family's Ukrainian, my wife's Ukrainian, my daughter's Ukrainian, my cat's Ukrainian. You know, how do I go back to Canada? You know, what would I do? Would I leave them here? And he said, oh no, you can bring them to Canada. And I was laughing. I was like, you know, they don't get, there's no process for, you know, I said to him, I said, it would be easier if I was an Afghani who helped the Canadian Army in Kabul with a family to be processed and live and work in Canada than it is as a Canadian with a Ukrainian family to have them have the ability to work in Canada. Just take a moment and think about that. Canadian Embassy left. You know, after my dad, there was flowers in front of the embassy because the Canadian Prime Minister at the time, Stephen Harper, did so much to represent Ukrainians against the Russians. And now our Prime Minister has announced that he will not even fly into Kiev to save any Ukrainians or Canadians with passports and bring them back home. Take a moment. Somehow, even if the Russians attack, somehow the Russian army is scarier or more dangerous than the Taliban. I mean, he sent planes to Afghanistan to rescue the translators, risking Canadian soldiers' lives. But for the Ukrainians, who have millions and millions and millions have family back in Canada, he does nothing. And he's not the only one. The British, Americans, same way. Who gives a fuck about the Ukrainians, right? If you live in Ukraine long enough, you realize this. It's not a Russian thing, right? The Russians actually do care a lot about Ukraine. This is why they seem to want to visit us so many times. It's the West. The West just doesn't. The West uses us again and again and discards us. No one says anything. So yeah, anyways. I don't think, is there going to be a war? I don't think so. This is from mine. Spoiler, I know a lot of Ukrainian politicians and business people, oligarchs. No one in Ukraine has heard any news that the Russians are going to invade. In fact, I haven't heard anything in the Russian newspapers, the Ukrainians. The only people who seem to talk about the Russians attacking Ukraine are the Western newspapers, which is just absolutely bizarre. Absolutely bizarre. Yeah, so am I leaving? No, I'm not leaving. This is my fucking country too. I love this country. Slava Ukraine. But not a good time to be here. Not a good time to be here if you read New York Times, Washington Post, or watch CNN or BBC, or listen to our fucking politicians. I think most of us here, the thing we're the most confused about is why are they even talking about this? You want to get the Russians to attack Ukraine. Suggest to Putin that if he does not attack Ukraine, then that would show he's weak, or he's afraid of NATO, or he's afraid of the Americans. That's the best way to get the Russians to to pull back. Tell them if they pull back that they're just a bunch of pussies. Once you think after Maidan, you guys would have learned your lesson. So anyway, but like I said, I'm not sure if it was, the coverage is so ridiculous. Like, what was it? CNN had a thing on the tunnels of Kiev and where we were going to protect ourselves if the fucking bombs drop. God, you gotta wonder why no one watches CNN anymore. It's terrible. I had another, I think it was CNN or BBC, if anyone was talking about, he was watching the coverage and they were showing Russian military buildup in Crimea. Satellite images showing the Russians dropping weapons in Crimea. And the problem is it was snowing. And so he was looking at this and he looked at the temperature. It was 12 degrees Celsius in Crimea. Crimea is really fucking warm because that's some crazy snow in Crimea for that military buildup. You would think good journalists would just take a moment to think, would it be snowing in Crimea? So like I said, I don't know. I don't think no one knows. No one knows. But I think most of us, maybe we hope, but I think we believe. Anyone who kind of understands this area, it doesn't make any sense for the Russians to attack. So hopefully that'll make you guys feel better. Now, let me just talk about who's responsible for this too. And like I said, one of the things is pushing Putin is never a good idea, period, right? But if you have a rabid bear and you put your hand in the mouth of a rabid bear that bites you, who's responsible for you being bitten? The bear or you? West, you guys play Ukraine so much. And I wish the Ukrainian government and Ukrainians would just finally just tell you all to just fuck off. NATO can fuck off. The European Union can fuck off. The Americans and the Canadians can fuck off because you don't give a shit. You would think the Canadians would care, right? I mean, the Ukrainians built our country. The Ukrainians were in internment camps in World War I. Here's a little historical fact. We don't have a history month, I know, in Canada for the Ukrainians. But they were put in internment camps in World War I. Ukrainians died there. They were actually in Canada. They were sent to build the farmlands in the middle of Canada as our prime minister at the time called them the filthy beasts of the East. And the idea was the Ukrainians would come to Canada, they would build the farms, we would kick them off the land, and we would replace them with good British citizens. This is historically true. But we don't care, right? It's just not what we want to talk about. The other thing is after Maidan, you would think, and let me just tell you something. Another reason why people, first of all, let me go through the countries and why people are responsible. The Ukrainians actually have the second largest army in Europe next to the Russians. This is something that's not known. Let me put it this way. Not even the Russians, not just the Russians, the Ukrainians could also march all the way to fucking Berlin and take all of that land. You think after Maidan, the European Union would actually, and NATO in Europe, would actually have realized that they should spend more money on defending against the East. If you had, this would not even be a conversation, right? The Germans. In order for you to go green, you shut down your nuclear power stations, which means every winter you become increasingly reliant on Russian oil to the point where you build a Russian pipeline that circumvents Ukraine and brings oil directly from Russia to Germany. Now, if that pipeline was not built in the Black Sea, the Russians could not invade Ukraine because the Ukrainians would just shut down the fucking pipeline to Europe, and that would have terrible consequences, not just to the Europeans, of course, but to the Russians. Just think about that. That was after Maidan. The Germans went, okay, what we need to do is we need to make another way to get Russian oil in case the Russians invade. This is how much the Germans give a shit about Ukraine. And by the way, if you want to talk about the history and who has some type of historical obligation to the Ukrainian people, Germany, I'm looking at you. right? Americans. I love the Americans talking about if they don't have a responsibility to Ukraine as well. After Perestroika, after 1990s, the Ukrainians had one of the largest nuclear weapon supplies in the world. And in order for them to dearm, the NATO, the Americans, the Russians signed treaties that guaranteed that all Ukrainian land from Crimea to the Donbass to Lugansk would be protected. If someone was to take a piece, then everyone would step in to protect it. Not just the Russians, the Americans. It's funny how you seem to have forgotten that treaty, but you're pretty good at breaking those, aren't you? Right? You were more willing to send soldiers to Georgia to defend Georgia than you are to defend Ukraine. It's amazing, right? It's the end of the empire. The British, the country of Winston Churchill. Afraid. Can you imagine if Winston Churchill, when the Nazis were coming through continental Europe, said, "No, we don't want to make people scared. We'll just, it'll cost us too much." Right? When Churchill realized during the Nazi days, the Nazis were never going to stop in Europe. You really think that the Russians are going to stop in Ukraine? It's not even a conspiracy theory. Go look at the Baltic states' populations of Russians, right? The Estonians, the Latvians, Lithuanians. They've got actually a higher percentage of Russians in their population than I believe Ukraine now, because we lost Donbass. And you think the Russians will not be looking at that next? Especially when he actually realizes just how weak and scared NATO is. It's and like I said, the Canadians. My grandfather fought for Canada and Europe, fight the Nazis, do what was right, protect our homelands. Ukrainian Canadians built the fucking country, and we have a leader that cares more about Afghanistan translators than he does about us. But that's just the history, right? Anyways, that's my little conversation on the streets of Kiev. Weather's beautiful. The city's fantastic. Everything's peaceful. Let's hope it stays this way. Bye.